Mark Twain might have been onto something when he said the clothes make the man. Our Parsha gives us an opportunity to reflect on whether or not that is the case. Do the clothes make the person? Our Parsha is full of the description of the ornate clothing of the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol in the role that they served as being the link between the people and Hashem in the Avodat HaMishkan, in the service of the tabernacle. And the question that rises is, how important is clothing? Why did the Kohanim need to have such specific clothing, such that if they did not wear it during their service, they would be liable for death? That's the first question about the purpose of clothing. The second question is more of a structural question on the Parsha, which is that the first 90% of our Parsha does indeed deal with the topic of clothing, but then at the very end of our Parsha, we have what seems to be a piece that's out of place. We have the description or the commandment to build the Mizbeach HaKtoret, the incense altar, and that would seem to be something which belongs in Parshat Truma, in last week's Parsha, which details the description of all of the other infrastructure, all of the other furniture of the Mishkan. So why is it here? Why is it out of place? We're going to try to answer these two questions by exploring the value of clothing and reflecting on that question of, is it the clothes? Do the clothes make the person? The Ramban, in answering this question, posits that the clothing and the design, the style of the particular Bigdei Kehuna, the priestly garments in our Parsha, were actually reflective of the aristocracy of the time. Meaning to say that the people, the common Jews, associated these kinds of robes and crowns, the kinds of garments that were unique to the Kohen or to the Kohanim, as associated with the royalty of the time. And that helped the people feel a sense of distinction, a sense of regard for the Kohanim when they were in their presence, that it wasn't just that they were interacting with an average person on the street, but they were interacting with someone who has a special mission and mandate as being that link between Hashem and the people. The Sefer HaChinuch says that the purpose of the clothing was not as much for the audience, for Bnei Israel, as much as it was for the Kohanim themselves, the wearer of the clothing. That when they stepped into that uniform, they thought of themselves differently. Their self-image was elevated. They felt a sense of elevation, that they were now in a role that required more of them. In the same way that many people have uniforms at work because it forces them to behave and conduct themselves in a different way, so too the Kohanim had a special uniform in order for themselves to step up and to perform the task that was expected of them. Those are two answers about clothing not really being neutral, but being significant in the eye of the beholder or in the wearer themselves. A third approach is an approach that is offered by scholar Benno Jacob, a 19th century biblical scholar, who wrote that clothing is not merely protection against the cold, which is something we're all thinking about as the storm approaches us here in New England, nor is it simply ornamentation. It is the first identifiable, essential symbol of human society. In man's moral conscience, clothing raises him above the beast. Taking the cue from the first time that clothing is introduced in the Torah, which is with Adam and Chava, the clothing there separates them from the animal kingdom. It's what confers upon them a sense of dignity and distinction from the rest of the of creation. And in doing, in that role, clothing is part of the creation act itself. It's not just something that's conventional to society, and it's not just to make an impression on the people who you interact with. It's not just to even make an impression on yourself. but it actually has to do with the layered construction of self, that a person builds who they are, their identity, by how they present themselves. And so Adam and Chava were distinguishing themselves from the rest of creation by adding this element of clothing into their self-consciousness. How does this answer the question about the Mizbeach HaKtoret at the end of the Parsha? I believe it does so because now the clothing itself becomes part of the utensils, part of the Klei HaMishkan. They are not just tangential, something for the Kohanim to be wearing in order for them to do their job. They're not functional. They actually attain their own Kedusha. They become Bigdei Kodesh, because just like the menorah, just like the shulchan, they are part of the infrastructure. They're part of the furniture of the Mishkan itself. They are a way in which the Kohanim build themselves up as individuals who are Misharet Hashem, who are serving Hashem. And in doing so, the Parsha of Tetzaveh, which focuses on clothing, is actually not an interruption and not a way of going off topic, but rather is a bridge or a link between the instruction to build all of the other utensils of the Mishkan and the Mizbeach HaKetoret, the incense altar at the end of our Parsha. With all of these ideas in mind, I would conclude by saying that, do the clothes make the person? I think the clothes help make the person. I hope that we're able to be a little bit more intentional when we get dressed tomorrow. I'll look forward to seeing everyone in Shul.